During this educational video, we will review the StreamMaster monitor and how to troubleshoot issues relating to the stow and deploy functions. We will begin by looking at the available controls and how they are set up, then move on to cover home sensors. After that, we will take a look at some basic troubleshooting tips, as well as addressing some specific issues. Finally, we will take a look at where to find additional literature and documentation for this and other Akron Brass products. There are several controls available for the StreamMaster which can be used either individually or combined to give multiple control options for a single monitor. The standard controller for the StreamMaster is the flush mount control box with stow and deploy. This is typically mounted on the pump panel and has switches to stow and deploy the monitor, as well as rotate and elevate the nozzle and control the flow pattern if used with an electric nozzle. The second control option is the tether controller, a handheld unit that plugs into a connector mounted on the apparatus. It allows the operator a certain degree of movement around the apparatus and will control the monitor and nozzle, but lacks a switch for stow and deploy. Another option is the wireless remote control. This allows the operator to move freely about the apparatus while operating the monitor. This unit has controls for the monitor and nozzle like the tether controller, but also has an auxiliary button that can be assigned to either stow or deploy, but not both. These controllers are arranged in the order of increasing complexity they add to the system, and depending on which are used, may require slight modification to the troubleshooting process when looking into a problem. There is also a controller unique to the StreamMaster, which is a 6-wire stow controller. It appears similar to the standard control box, but uses fewer wires, so fewer slip rings are needed when routing through the turntable of a ladder. To accomplish this, there is no designated wire for stow or deploy, instead using a combination of signals to signal stow and deploy, and the indicator LED is removed as well. If your StreamMaster has a stow function, then it contains two sensors, also referred to as limit switches, that are used to provide a limited amount of position feedback to allow the monitor to reach its assigned stow position. These sensors are simple magnetic switches that use the location of a corresponding magnet to find a single designated reference position. Let's examine how the process works. When the stow button is pressed, the monitor rotates left and right to find the center rotation magnet. The nozzle then moves up and down to locate the elevation magnet. This is the default stow position. If a new stow position has been learned, the monitor will then move to that point. The sensors are only used for stowing the monitor because the StreamMaster logic board does not allow you to program a separate deployed position. Instead, it starts at the stowed position and uses dip switches on the logic board to tell the monitor how many seconds away from the stowed position to move. The following pictures will show where the switch and magnet are located for both elevation and rotation. To locate the sensors on the StreamMaster, follow the two wires coming off of the wiring harness that are not connected to the motors or the nozzle. They will go to the back of the monitor and plug into two sockets attached to the monitor. The first arrow points to the elevation sensor. The second arrow points to the cable for the rotation sensor. The sensor is tucked between the body of the monitor and the rotation motor. Now let's zoom in a little bit and examine the sensor assembly itself. The most visible part of the sensor assembly, which the first arrow points to, is not actually the sensor. It is the socket that the wiring harness plugs into. The second arrow points to the sensor housing that screws into the monitor. Both the elevation and rotation sensors are identical and come packaged together if replacement sensors are ordered. The magnets that these sensors react to are internal to the monitor and are not adjustable. We will discuss the sensors further in the troubleshooting section. So where to start? Ideally, troubleshooting should be carried out with the truck running to ensure the recommended minimum voltage of 11.5 volts under load for normal operation. Check for any error codes displayed by the indicator LED. If your system lacks an indicator LED due to using a tether instead of the flush mount control box, you will need to open up the logic box to look at the LEDs on the logic board. For detailed information on the error codes, refer to the installation and operating instructions on the Akron Brass website. Before tearing into the wiring, take a look over the system and make sure that all the plugs and connections are fully seated and in the correct sockets. Also, that the wiring in the logic box is correct and making good connection in the terminal blocks. The most useful equipment to have available, aside from the wiring schematic for the logic box, is a good multimeter. You will need to be able to measure voltages, as well as check continuity and possibly measure resistance. Another helpful tool is a short jumper wire that can be used to simulate switch presses in the logic box by bridging the appropriate switch input contacts. So what is a logic box and where do I find it? The logic box is a gray box approximately 6 by 9 inches in size and will be located within 8 feet of the monitor. There is a wiring diagram on the underside of the lid. The U2 logic box, which is not covered by this presentation and should not be opened, has an identification sticker on top of the lid and has 2 plugs on the side of the box. Now that you know what to look for, let's take a look at some specific example problems. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the 6-wire Stow controller has the advantage of a smaller wiring bundle, but it can cause problems if you are not aware that it has been installed or are not familiar with how it will impact certain functions, primarily entering Learn mode to program a new Stow position. This controller can be recognized by the lack of an indicator LED on the face of the controller. Also, where the controller is wired to the logic box, there will not be any wires connected to terminal block 1, pins 7, 8, or 9. And dip switch 1 should be in the up position. There are several reasons why the monitor will not go into Learn mode. One of those is the presence of a 6-wire Stow controller. That isn't to say that you can't get into Learn mode with this controller, just be aware that it requires some adjustments to be made. I won't go into those here, but there are detailed instructions in the StreamMaster operating instructions available on the Akron Brass website. Additionally, if dip switch 2 is up, the monitor will not enter Learn mode. Likewise, the position of dip switch 8 is important since its function is to enable or disable Learn mode. If it is down or disabled, the monitor will still use its Learn, Stow, and Deploy positions, but it will not enter Learn mode to program a new position, which is desirable to prevent accidentally setting a new position, but is frustrating if someone legitimately wants to learn a new position and can't get into Learn mode. This next condition is tied to specific stow positions. For instance, if the monitor is mounted under a ladder and is stowed with the nozzle tucked up against the underside of the ladder. If the monitor goes to its stow position and either generates an error or doesn't turn off the stow light, it is likely because the stow position that is programmed is too close to the hard stop or limit of travel. If this happens, simply relearn the stow position, but back off slightly from the hard stop. For this last example, what if you press the switch to stow the monitor and it rotates instead of stowing? There are 2 likely causes based on the exact behavior of the monitor. If it only rotates to the right as long as the stow switch is held, check to see if you have a 6-wire Stow controller, missing wires on pins 7, 8, and 9, and then make sure that the dip switch 1 is in the up position. If it is down, the logic board does not recognize the combination of fog, stream, and write by the controller to signal the stow command, and it treats it as if you had pressed the switch to rotate the monitor to the right. On the other hand, if you momentarily press the stow switch and the monitor rotates all the way to the hard stop, then the sensor has not picked up the magnet, and the sensor and wiring harness will need to be checked for damage. The sensor closes the circuit when it is over the magnet, so the continuity function on your multimeter can be used on the pins of the sensor plug to check that the sensor is functioning properly. The wiring harness needs to be checked as well. Pin 28 on TB3 is responsible for supplying voltage to both sensors, and pin 26 on TB3 will register voltage when the rotation sensor is over the magnet, completing the circuit. Please note though, that since there is a resistor in the wiring harness, you should only get around 7.5 volts on pin 26 for a 12-volt system. To find product flyers, CAD files, specs, and more on the Model 3578 StreamMaster, visit our website at akronbrass.com and search by product name or style number.